Are we in a buyer's market here in Minnesota? I got a video for you to watch from Michael, who does a lot of these walking videos. And he's talking about Redfin and how they had the biggest gap on record in recent records as far as the amount of sellers versus buyers. And based on their definition and so forth, we are definitely in a buyer's market right now. Minnesota is probably one of the last states to get to that point, but there's going to be some great discounts for investor buyers coming up. I will talk about that a little bit after the video, but I want to lead you into the video so you can see what he's talking about.
As accurate of a picture as I can possibly give you of what's going on in the housing market, kind of like I did the other day for the job market, because there's a lot of conflicting information flying around about all of this stuff. And really, for the average person that's not paying attention to this stuff on a regular basis, probably has no idea what's going on. You just go from headline to headline and take whatever they tell you at face value. But the truth couldn't be further from what they're telling you, guys. Because the first thing I want to start with is how right now is actually a buyer's market. And even though by traditional historical standards it's not, which means we need to have more than 6 months worth of inventory on the US housing market for it to be considered a buyer's market, the rules of the game have been changing because buyer demand is extremely low. We're talking demand levels that we haven't seen since the early 1990s, all right? And at the same token, Redfin just came out with some data showing us that there are 36.8% more sellers than buyers as of October of 2025. And that is the largest gap in their records dating back to 2013, which means you just have way too many sellers and not enough buyers right now. And that's the sort of imbalance that we can use to define a buyer's market. It doesn't have to be a certain level of inventory anymore. It's more the state of affairs that kind of defines whether it's a seller's market or buyer's market. Because put the shoe on the other foot. If you had 36% more buyers than sellers, we would be calling it a seller's market, right? But it isn't. In fact, even Redfin is changing how they define things. Redfin now defines a buyer's market as one with at least 10% more sellers than buyers. Well, by that standard, we are in a full-blown buyer's market because it is triple that. In fact, Redfin...
How about that video clip? Pretty good. You might want to check out the whole thing. I've been following him for a couple years. He does a really good job in the videos. Again, he's talking about the big gap, and this gap is very much shifted the other way around of what we've seen since housing's really been climbing since 2012. Sellers have had it really good. They've had a lot of appreciation and stuff, but things are really turning around. And as the inventory starts to build and grow, and he's talking about the buyer demand being really low, I think a lot of that's going to be because a lot of them also can't get financing very easily. A lot of people out there. And there's just going to be more net sellers, because of the people, almost half of them getting rejected on the cash out refis and stuff for different reasons. They're trying to pull out money for different reasons, They either trying to get rid of credit card bills or lower their payment or something, but rates have been high for a while. So these are all reasons that we're going to start seeing a lot more motivated sellers. And the sellers just haven't seen anything like this in quite a long time. So where you can see this dynamic play out, the two-sided marketplace is on the first Tuesday of every month at MNREIA, 7 o'clock. Before the speaker and so forth, they will have the haves and wants section. It's also haves and haves, where it's people that have the desire to buy an investor if it's the right terms, the right price, and then the people that have the property. And sometimes the people that have the property are the sellers, motivated sellers, and then sometimes it's a wholesaler that wants to assign properties. The buyers are realizing that prices are dropping, so they can just wait around a little bit. And it makes the sellers and the wholesalers need to get better at negotiating. They need to add more value by giving more of that information up front, as far as the estimates, the scope of work, and so forth. The seller's expectations need to be in line. They need to know that they've probably got deferred maintenance for a few decades now, and they need to be realistic. And they can't just say, well, dollar for dollar, I'll just give you that net discount. That's not how it works. You got to let the the flipper, if it's a flip property, make their $40,000 profit and so forth. So it's going to be very interesting times when you're listening to the haves and wants and people have the microphone and you want to take notes and you want to actually pay close attention because you want to kind of get a feel for where the market's at and where the pricing's at. And sometimes people will need to sell some very large packages of properties as well. So if you're going to buy them on terms, make sure they got good cash flow, good cash on cash return. Make sure they're good buy and holds for a long time. But usually you're wearing the flipper hat or the landlord buy and hold hat. It's usually one of those. Keep an open mind. The first price you hear, the first terms you hear as an investor buyer, you most likely are going to want to negotiate with the idea that you're looking at future prices, 2028, 2029 prices. Whereas the seller is going to be kicking themselves wishing they would have sold in 2021 because the market's really shifted quite a bit. So, we had multiple offers, back a few years ago in low inventory. In really nice areas of Minnesota, there's probably still pretty low inventory. But you're going to start to see East St. Paul and North Minneapolis, some of those on the perimeter, you're going to start to, and the perimeter cities, I should say, like the Princetons and Zimmermans, you're going to start to see those houses sit a lot longer. Inventory start to grow out. And then also the million and a half homes and stuff, $2 million homes, for a lot of people, unless they're experts at it, for a lot of people, those like builders and some homeowners, if the place isn't updated, those places will sit a while. So just keep that in mind as well. So those are back in 06, 07, 08, those are some huge discounts, 30-40% discounts on some of those big ones. Well, I don't know how it'll be this time around, but lending should get tighter. And when you show up that first Tuesday, you want to get good at understanding pricing, comps, scope of work, estimated repairs, negotiating, how to work with wholesalers, and how to look for really good seller financing terms.